Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's virtual information session about the ACE Fellows Program. My name is Robin Matras-Helms. I'm Assistant Vice President for Programs and Global Initiatives here at ACE. Need a next slide, please? So a poll should have just popped up for you. We'd like to get a sense of who's in the room today and what you're hoping to learn from our session. So if you could please just indicate which of these just describes you. You're applying or thinking about applying to be a fellow. You have nominated or are considering nominating a colleague to participate as a fellow, or your institution is interested in hosting a fellow. And I'll note that these are not mutually exclusive, so please check all that apply. And I see our results are popping up here now. We'll give this just another minute or two. All right. Well, great. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I think you can go ahead and end the poll. So the majority of people in our audience today are considering applying for the fellowship themselves. So we will focus particularly on that information, but we'll also cover some information for nominators and potential host institutions as well. Let's see. I think, Charlotte, can you go ahead and take the poll down? Okay, I think we're good. All right, so an overview of our agenda for today. We'll start with some introductions. We'll spend a little time doing an overview of the Fellows Program, focusing in particular on the goals of the program and what that fellowship year looks like. We'll have a panel discussion with our experts on expectations and outcomes from the Fellows Program. And then we'll end with some nuts and bolts information about how to actually go about applying for the program and some information for nominators and hosts as well. We invite you to submit questions throughout the chat, throughout the entire session, and we'll try to answer those as those come in. Need a next slide, please? Some introductions to kick us off. So I'm Robin Helms, Assistant Vice President for Programs and Global Initiatives at ACE. I'm joined by my colleague, Nita Banks, Associate Director for the Fellows Program, and Lisa Motley, Senior Program Manager here at ACE, who also works closely with us on the Fellows Program. Our expert panel members are Ron Carter, former president of Johnson C. Smith University and president and CEO of Carter and Associates, and an ACE Fellows Program SAGE. Val Moeller, president emeritus at Columbus State Community College, and also an ACE Fellows Program SAGE. And you'll hear a little bit more from them during the panel about the SAGE role and how they work with fellows. And then Rich Haldobler, president of William Patterson University, ACE Fellow in 2005-2006, current Council of Fellows Chair and Program Mentor and Nominator. You'll also hear from Rich about his various hats and roles with the program. Next slide, please. Thank you, Nita. So the ACE Fellows Program equips diverse higher education leaders with experience, knowledge, and skills to demonstrate agility throughout their careers, transform colleges and universities, and advance equity and inclusion in higher education. There are four kind of key program elements that make up the fellowship year. So the first is group-centered learning. This consists of 4 full cohort events or retreats. We have in the past done these in person, in the most recent past done them all virtually, and we'll see what that looks like going forward. But it's an opportunity to convene with the whole cohort for group-centered learning. Fellows participate in case studies, so an opportunity to work together with a group of the cohort to apply what you're learning in your fellowship to real-world situations, and then topical webinars throughout the process. The second component is self-directed learning. This includes a fellowship project that you design to really dig deep into a particular area during your fellowship year, and a learning contract through which fellows articulate their goals for the program and keep themselves on track with those goals. The third component is the fellowship placement. So this is the time spent with the host institution. That might be an academic year, 1 semester, or periodic visits. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the info session about what that looks like. And then finally, ongoing mentoring throughout the program from a number of sources, including host campus leaders, the ACE SAGEs, your fellows, and the ACE Fellows Program team. Next slide, please, Nina. So who should apply for the Fellows Program? We're looking for candidates who have a demonstrated record of leadership in an institution-wide context. And you can see here that we've had a lot of different roles represented, and there's quite a bit of flexibility on the role of incoming fellows. We also have had fellows from outside of higher education institutions. So from the National Science Foundation, for example, and higher ed associations that are really seeking to deepen their higher education leadership. And from there, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Nita to take us to the next slide.
So I won't read this slide just because it is a bit dense, but what we recommend is that as you think about becoming a fellow, or should you become a fellow, think about what roles would be a good fit for you in the next 3 to 5 years. What are your current strengths? In what areas do you have expertise? And then think about what areas that you lack expertise and would like to acquire additional knowledge. The Fellows Program can help you remedy that in a lot of areas through the curricular areas, through the mentoring, the campus visits, the alumni planned events and professional development, and through the self-directed learning. At the end of the fellowship year, think of the ways that you can contribute back innovatively and entrepreneurially to your institution and to higher education. And so this is a snapshot of the overall year. This does not include all of our activities, but just a highlight of our primary kind of in-person or virtual events. So all of these activities work together as a cohesive whole. So they are individual modules per se, but they are all connected back to the larger picture. So we start with the orientation, and the orientation is kind of a brief snapshot into yourself as a leader. We use the Insights Inventory and the Gallup Strengths Finder to prompt deeper understanding of yourself, your individual strengths as a leader, and how you engage with others. A secondary feature of the orientation is to introduce the entire cohort to one another and hear advice from us, the fellows team, members of the alumni. Rich has done this in the past. And you'll also be introduced to your SAGE groups at the orientation. And each of our SAGEs takes a smaller group of 5 to 7, depending on the year and how many fellows we have in a cohort that year. And they help you, they serve as kind of your program mentor, and they help you with leadership plans, development plans, how you connect when you're on your host campus, just in a myriad of ways. They are SAGEs in the truest sense of the word. The opening retreat begins with an exploratory stage of higher education issues, the impacts such as the impact leaders, so DEI, higher education finance, institutional planning, and institutional transformation. So there's several group activities that occur during the opening retreat. There's a very large case studies that the fellows work on together, and we an additional goal of this is to promote group cohesion. So all the group time works to gel the fellows cohort together. The mid-year retreat pivots with a focus on institutional transformation. We still focus on DEI and finance, but it is at a macro level, institutional level, rather than individual units or departmental finance. We build on the planning session by discussing methods of enacting systematic change within the institution during this retreat. Finally, the closing retreat closes the fellowship year with how you can advance the higher education imperative while leading in uncertain times and discerning what's next for you in your career and in higher education. So I pivot back to the Council of Fellows Weekend and the ACE annual meeting. The ACE annual meeting and the Council of Fellows Weekend is an event that we encourage fellows to attend. It introduces current fellows to the program alumni, such as Rich, other members of the alumni, the executive board, executive committee, and exposes fellows to a wealth of new colleagues, mentors, and friends. And the alumni plan the professional development sessions, and these are complements to our curriculum and provide fellows with other expert voices. So we definitely strongly encourage fellows to participate. And so now we hear from our experts.
All right, thank you, Nita. For those of you who have joined us since our initial introductions, I will reintroduce our expert panel briefly. Ron Carter is former president of Johnson C. Smith University and president and CEO of Carter and Associates. Val Moeller is president emeritus of Columbus State Community College. And Rachel Dobler is a former ACE fellow, current Council of Fellows chair, and a program mentor and nominator. So thanks very much to all three of you for being here today to be part of this conversation. I would like to start off really with kind of some introductions. So if you could each tell us a bit about your engagement over time and current role with the Fellows Program, that would be a great way to kick us off. And maybe we'll start with Val for this one.
Okay. As you know, I'm Val Moeller, and I have been involved with the program for 10 years as a SAGE. And I was part before when I was president. I was also on the board of ACEs. I had heard about the program, and really the number of years and how the program has evolved has been something that I think has been helpful because higher ed changes and our environment is changing daily. So the program has to respond to the new needs and the new leadership skills and thought processes that institutions need. I've enjoyed this and continue to enjoy doing this work because I do believe in mentoring and leadership development.
And Val, could you talk a little bit broadly about the role of the SAGEs and how you work with fellows?
Oh, yeah.
I'd be happy to. But Val, please go ahead.
Okay. The role of the SAGEs, and sometimes people wonder why we got called the SAGEs. We were not called the SAGEs when I started the program. We used to be called Presidential Leadership Fellow Group Leaders, the Fellow Program. And one of the past directors, several past directors, one time realized that most of us are retired presidents. We do have a number of years of being in positions of leadership in higher education. And so that we had wisdom and experience, and she announced to the group that we were SAGEs. So that's how the name stayed. The approaches that I usually take as a SAGE, I try first when I'm, as Anita mentioned, that the cohort is divided into smaller groups. This year I have 6 fellows. I've had as many as 8. And it's my process is to try and learn what is important to each fellow, what do they want to get out of the program, and then how do I help them set their goals, because they have goals from the institution that their mentors from their home institution want them to pursue. Sometimes the host institution will also have an interest that a fellow do some project for them. So how does that all work in helping the fellow develop their leadership skills and to grow in the program? So if you've not done anything with budget, should you not talk into the CFO? Are you going to be able to participate in cabinet meetings at the host institution? And sometimes it's helping a fellow to be able to ask for how they would like to see, how they would like to pursue that goal. And it's a negotiation then between the fellow and the host institution. And then throughout the year, we several individual, I meet with them individually, and then also the group meets where they share with each other what they're learning since they're learning at their host institutions. And and so what if there's any issues of difficulty or any problems, any challenges, that also gets discussed. And some of the things we don't talk about them. There's a code of silence that we keep, and there's the teams begin to fall. So that having also a mid-year, before the mid-year, I start to talk to them about what do you see yourself doing when you go back to your home institution and then beyond. And we start to talk about whether there's some of them get promoted, others don't, but how do you keep in the mind of your institution that they did send you to this fellowship program, and how can you in the institution show leadership or take on responsibilities that demonstrate the leadership that you bring back from this program.
Perfect, thank you. Ron, as a fellow SAGE, do you want to give an introduction and build on what Val talked about the role of the SAGEs?
Yes, and let me start by saying that Val and I are 2 of 7 SAGEs, and I think when we add up the years that we've been involved in higher education, we spanned over 100 years, and we represent different types of institutions. So it is a very rich experience that we bring to the ACE Fellows. I'm particularly interested in this ongoing mentoring in the areas of helping you develop your learning contract. And I want to emphasize how important it is for you to understand your own leadership mapping, how you increase your leadership value by understanding your leadership competencies, because all of the things that you will go through the ACE Fellowship really is not just so that you say that I have done a seminar in budgeting and business modeling, but you understand yourself in that process, and you're very clear about your own narrative of how you are a leader. And that's what I find most exciting. But we spend a lot of time working with you, and not only in terms of your leadership, your learning contract, helping you with your fellowship placement, walking you through some very thorny issues that are impacting and shaking the foundation of higher education. So I'm excited about it, and I look forward to working with some of you in the very near future.
Wonderful, thank you, Ron. So Rich, can you tell us a little bit about the many hats that you've worn and the role that alumni play in this program?
Sure, thanks, Robin. I have been involved with the program every year for 16 years since I was a fellow in 2005, 2006, in some capacity or another. And for me, the experience really led me to think seriously about a presidency post-fellowship. I chose to go to a very different type of institution for my fellowship. I had done my professional work in rural public, and I went to urban private for my experience so I could get a sense of how different institutions worked, and really had the opportunity to sort of be sort of that fly on the wall during that year and see how institutions work and leadership works. And it really was, and I think if you'll hear from more alumni and what a sort of transformational experience it is. And what I love about the program, and I've done other leadership programs as well, is you'll have a lot of leadership programs that have people who have studied it but haven't done it. And what I think is great about the ACE Fellowship program, and our 2 SAGEs are perfect examples, is you have people who understand the theory but also understand the application of the theory. And when you're in these leadership roles, sometimes theory and practice align, and sometimes theory and practice don't align. And so what I really enjoyed from my learning experience was just getting that advice and that SAGE counsel from seasoned veterans who have really done this work. And I think, it could just be my own applied learning model, but I really found it the most beneficial leadership program of all the ones that I've attended. Now, post-fellowship, as it says in my title, I'm the current Council of Fellows chair. And the Council of Fellows, as they alluded to earlier, is just the Alumni Association. So all of us from previous classes gather together for Alumni Weekend, which is usually just prior to the annual meeting. There's professional development programming that goes on that is usually about current topics that are going on in higher education that are usually led by presidents or other institutional thought leaders. We have great networking opportunities going forward. I've been on all of the committees that are in the council: program development, outreach engagement, finance and development. All of them have key roles to play. But I will say that one of the great benefits of being engaged in the alumni organization post-fellowship is it enhances your network of people that you know. I left the ACE Fellow program in 2005, 2006, knowing about 30 people. But now I can say that I know virtually hundreds of people through my engagement with the Alumni Association. So being able to call on experts who are doing things in the field that I may or may not be versed in and getting their sage counsel, finding out what's going on statewide and nationwide, it's just been really a fabulous network. And it's one of the reasons why I still stay engaged all these years later. So we hope that you'll think about applying, and we hope that we'll be able to call you a fellow soon as you go through the interview process. And I always just say that if I can speak to any of you via email or via Zoom about the program individually, I'm happy to do that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rich. We have a couple of questions, and actually someone previewed one of our questions for you in the chat, in fact. And please feel free, all three of you, to jump in on this. So how does a prospective fellow and or their nominator know that it's the right time in a candidate's career to join the fellows program?
Well, I guess I can jump in. I think it is a nomination process. So I think having that conversation with key leaders on your campus about your own development on campus and what an external experience might provide both to you professionally, but as Juanita alluded to your institution in terms of bringing back valuable information to lead transformational change, is I think good conversations to think about when you're talking about your nominator. And I think it does give you the ability, the experience does give you the ability to get real up and close to it, scratch it, smell it, look at it without having to do it. And I think that's the most valuable thing. I think, and if you think that you're at that time in your career where you have the ability to think about institutional transformation on a macro level, and you've done some of that work in your institution, but are looking for more, now is the time.
And may I just jump in and say the right time is where you are on your growing edge, where you feel you need to stretch, or are you at the point in your career where you really feel I need to stretch, I need to learn more than what I'm experiencing right now in my position. This is what the ACE Fellows program will give you the opportunity to do, to stretch in areas that you have very little experience, but you will want to have that experience as you continue to grow in your career.
If I can add the way I dealt with sending fellows or any program, as a college president and being a leader, I always felt it was my responsibility to help develop other leaders and develop the people who worked in the institution, especially my team. And so every year, as part of their evaluation, we talked about what were the professional development activities they were going to pursue in the following year. And many times the conversation would lead to, maybe you should attend this, maybe you should go to this program. And that's how some of the fellows end up coming to this program. And it is really an assessment, are you ready for the program? Because some folks are not ready. But I think it is that conversation that assesses whether someone is ready to go and be a fellow.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to pose one more question to our panelists, and we will keep responding to questions in the chat as well. So thank you. Feel free to keep them coming. So for our panelists, a forward-looking question. As you think, knowing that our audience is mostly potential fellows, what advice do you have for prospective fellows, as well as nominators and host institutions, on really how to make the most of the experience to the benefit of host institutions, home institutions, and fellows' own careers?
I would say that you must be prepared to be fully engaged. This is a year-long fellowship. We really want to occupy your undivided attention. So, and this also pivots back toward the previous question, how do you know that you're ready? When you're also able to let go of what you're doing at your home institution in order to fully engage the expectations at your host institution and participating in the rich seminars and case studies that will be in front of you almost every day.
I would, if I can add, I would say that the fellows program, as Ron said, you have to be fully engaged. It is not something you're going to do on the side. I mean, just in a few hours a week or a few hours even in the day. It is more the engagement, and it is really being able to leave what you're doing and say, this is my time to grow, and I am going to go and do this for my own growth, for my professional, personal growth, and even for what I bring back to the institution. If you're not ready to do that, then you're not ready for the program.
And I would just say that it's important to think about the word fellow and fellowship. So as they laid out the program, you'll see that some of the learning is directed learning and intentional learning, but part of the learning is self-directed and self-exploratory. No institutional placement will give you everything you need. So you have to sort of go out and explore and figure out where you're going to get that information that you're looking for that may or may not be at your host institution. And ACE and the fellow program really has a vast treasure chest of knowledge that can say, you know, look here, or talk to this person, or talk to this person. Picking up the phone and saying I'm an ACE fellow is a great entree into talking to institutions and different presidents. So I think also getting them, you know, one of the ways of getting the most out of it is being self-directed in terms of your own learning that isn't part of the seminars that they offer throughout the year.
Great, thank you. Well, this is great advice. Val and Rich, I know you need to move on to other commitments in just a minute, but I might ask Ron if you would be able to take just one of our questions that's come up in the chat with a little bit of advice for potential fellows on talking to their institutions to ask for the funding and the opportunity to do this. Do you have any advice? And Val and Rich, if you have anything before you have to drop off, that would be great to hear from you as well. But I know that's a question that is on many potential fellows' minds.
What I would say before I go, because when you talk about commitment, there's a commitment from the fellow, but also there has to be a commitment from the institution that's nominating the fellow, and then the host institution. So if it's the institution is not ready to give you time to go and pay the fee, I mean, then we don't have really a good fellowship.
I want to go back to one of my statements, increasing your leadership value. If your home institution appreciates your leadership value, then your home institution will want to support you financially. And it's the same with the host institution. When you interview, when you send your learning contracts to them and they review, they will look at the value you will bring to them, and they see you worth the investment. So it's really all about your value and how people appreciate your value.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you, Rich and Val. This was a great conversation. Ron, if you're able to stay on for a bit, that's wonderful. So there's lots of great questions coming through in the chat. So we will continue to address some of those. The questions about the placement process, Nita's going to cover that in just a moment. But for questions, we'll save the chat also. And so for questions that we don't get to as part of the conversation today, we can reach out to answer some of those individually as well. But I'd like to turn it back over to Nita to walk us through a bit more information about the application process.
I will leave this kind of on the screen, but I won't read this to you. I'll let you all absorb this, but I will try to answer some of the chat questions about placement. So as far as, just let me say a quick thing about the application. We do not have a set cohort size. So our goal is to establish a well-rounded cohort with diverse fellows from various different backgrounds, racial demographies, gender, institutional, and functional roles on their campuses. So we don't say we're only taking 40 this year or 50. There's no set amount. So what one of the questions is how the best advice for selecting a partner or placement institution. We put the fellows through a very, and Ron can speak to this, rigorous process that we call the placement process, because it is indeed a process. So we guide you with questions to think about, research to conduct, and you have to kind of solicit information either from your nominator, going to the institutional websites that you are interested in. But what we strongly advocate is that fellows consider the quality of the mentor rather than the caliber of the institution. So it is not about an Ivy League institution where you may not have access. It is about a small public where you have on clear and direct access to the president. And not to say you couldn't get that from an Ivy, but what we have found over the years is that that is very difficult. So we encourage fellows to think about the mentor and not, this would look good on my CV because I was a fellow at Harvard. So think about that as you're going through that process. We do not place fellows at institutions. I know it kind of sounds redundant because it is called the placement process, but we do not say fellow A is going to institution B. You do the legwork on saying, these are the institutions that I'm thinking about. I've talked to my nominator. This is what he or she recommends, but I also am interested in learning about this initiative that the institution is doing, or this mentor is very innovative or entrepreneurial, or whatever what you are looking for in a mentor. That's the institution. Like, you do the research there. And what we will do is we will reach out again through this guided process to the hosting institution on your behalf. And that process is very structured, and I won't belabor that point because it is indeed a process. So the best thing I can say about the placement process is that you are not alone in this process. You have the SAGEs, you have us, you have former fellows who we will pair you with. So the process is very structured and it's very intentional. So we just ask that fellows allow us to kind of guide them through that process, rather than, you don't have to panic about, at the time of application, identifying a placement institution, because that we do that later on and it will make a bit more sense to you in that process. You are not required to choose although we ask fellows or applicants to identify at the time of application a placement, a year-long, a semester, or periodic visits. You can change that up until the point where we start sending out placement requests on your behalf. So this is just for us to get a kind of benchmark of what people are thinking for the year, but it can be changed. It's not locked in stone. So you can shift at any point. honestly, even during the placement process, we allow for flexibility if life has changed, if you need to change something where you can't do a year and you can do a semester. There was also a question about the split placements. And for those who are not aware, there are, I'll flip to the next slide just to kind of get us overview. There are 3 placement options that we currently have. It's the academic year. So it's typically fellows leave their home campus in August and return in June, or whatever they negotiate with their potential host campuses. The 1 semester, either fall or spring, and periodics, which is a total of 12, at least 12 weeks, but can be more depending on what you negotiate with your host institution. For the semester placement, we have found that the split option of a 1 semester at institution A and 1 semester at institution B, it can be done if managed well. It is not optimal just because you aren't necessarily in the flow of the institution, but it can be done. Not something that we truly encourage, but it done well, it can be supported, and we will give you kind of recommendations on how to do that. Periodic visits are also slightly challenging if the fellow is not diligent in kind of introducing themselves into the campus community. So when you are away, those times where you are at your home campus, to be intentional about staying in contact at your placement institution. So when you come back, they don't go, who is that? Who is that person? So you want to be kind of a familiar face, even though you are not on staff. You just want to be in the flow of kind of what they are doing on their host campuses. I'm just kind of scrolling.
Nita, Ron very graciously raised his hand with a comment a moment ago. Ron, do you want to chime
insert,
in,
sir?
Yes, I encourage all of you to look at your CVs and ask how diverse is your CV? And then ask what other experience should I have in order to show that my higher educational experiences are diverse and inclusive, and that will help you with the match for your host institution. Now, let me just say, I am giving you this strong advice because I serve as an executive search consultant. I've done searches for presidencies, provosts, vice presidents, and as I sit in a room with search committees, I hear them say over and over, this applicant has a narrow CV. I don't see the diversity there. I don't see a breadth of experiences. So you want to make sure that when you are looking for your host institution, you're not simply replicating what you are already experiencing at your home institution.
And I'll try to answer as many of the questions that are appearing in the chat as possible. As far as how are the duties typically covered during the fellowship time away, fellows have done the fellows program in a myriad of ways. Some of them have taken sabbatical. Some of them have used the opportunity, if they are in a leadership position or have an administrative position, to groom kind of in that succession planning way junior staff by shifting some of your primary responsibilities to them. That really is not a question that we can answer. We can provide advice on how to do that, but it really is a negotiation between the fellow and his or her leadership on their individual campuses, because roles vary. So it's hard to say a dean can give all of their responsibilities to an associate dean, so it's a bit harder to say. So I'll say this in kind of conclusion is that if you are selected as a fellow, and I hope you are, you can talk to us and we can help you kind of navigate that conversation a little bit. And to clarify, the main cost of the host institution is covering the salary for yes. In all of these instances, the host institution, the home institution, pays the fellow's salary for the year that they are away. the additional costs come in depending on the placement option selected by the fellow. So that's why you see those fluctuations in the number. But the salary is a salary. You are employed by your home or nominating institution. So they continue to pay your salary and benefits while you're doing the ACE Fellows Program.
Nita, one more question that I saw that came up related to costs, since we're on the costs topic right now, was the professional development budget. Could you say a little bit more about how that's determined and how that works?
So that's also one of those flexible items. And what we say is we recommend a minimum of $10,000. Some institutions give more. We recommend that they don't go less than 10,000. So the professional development budget would cover your travel to the 3 program retreats that we have, the ACE annual meeting or Council Fellows Weekend that we encourage fellows to go to, any national meetings or campus visits that we encourage the fellows to go on during the fellowship year so that they get a broader view of the higher education landscape. So what fellows have been very creative in the past of pulling travel budgets from their home institution, if that is an option for them. Some of them have asked for presidential discretionary funds in the past. Some have asked their hosts for additional stipends. So it really, it's one of those things that's also variable. And I know we will often say variable or dependent, and that is the truth about the fellows program. It is as unique as the number of fellows. So every experience can be different. So it's hard to give, we can give a macro guidance on things, but some things are very specific based on in the institutions, systems, all of that. So, it's a TBD, and a lot of times because we have to talk to you specifically to kind of hear where you're coming from and to know a little bit more detail, but that's it in a nutshell. I'm trying to catch him, Robin, so if you see anything else. We do not discourage multiple nominations from an institution. We actually encourage it. So institutions can nominate as many people as they think would be a good fellow. If they're willing to financially support fellows while they are away, some institutions have actually created their own internal vetting processes that determines the number of applicants that they will support in a year. So no, we put no prohibition on the number of nominees that an institution could have.
And I would just add that we've had many institutions that have nominated fellows year after year and sort of have a good experience, and the fellow comes back and it builds going forward as well. So creating momentum in that sense. I did see one more question just popped in, and this had come up before, I think, too, about whether a fellow's placement can be at an international non-US university. Nita, do you want to say a little bit about that one?
Yeah, and I did answer that in the chat, but I'll kind of say it publicly. Yes, an international institution can host a fellow. If they are willing to host a fellow, we will handle that the same way we handle national institutions. The caveat to all placement institutions, national or international, is that they have to be a member of ACE. So if an international institution is an ACE member or willing to become one, they are as open to a placement as any national institution.
Thank you. And I would just add that the reverse is true as well. We absolutely welcome fellow applicants from outside the US. And we've had a number over the years as well, and would love to see that participation grow. So I see we are at 3:44. I think we've hit most of the questions, but we will also kind of compile the questions from the chat and send out a follow-up email to everybody who is registered with some additional information. We'll send along the slides and the recording as well. Nita, do you want to scroll through just to the last slide that has some contact
and we can
information?
share this as well if this slide deck, if anybody is interested. This is just a kind of overview of the kind of benefits to host and nominating institutions. So if your nominator is on the cusp of nominating you, these are some things that you can use to advocate on your behalf as far as support my nomination. And that's it. You can always reach out to us individually or through the email address on the screen, and we'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you all would have. I know it's harder to kind of get your individual answers answered in this format. So please feel free to email us. We are checking that inbox kind of rigorously. So with that, I turn it back to Robin.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I do see, again, a few of these last questions coming through. We'll address those by email. And a special thanks to Ron for joining us today, and to my colleagues, Nita, Lisa, and Charlotte for helping us with this webinar. And good luck, everyone, with the applications, and we will be in touch. Take care, everybody.